Shelby, welcome to the show. So good to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I know we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of things to share with the audience about you, and a lot of fun to be had today. So let's get right into it. So first things first, love if you would introduce yourself to the audience. Let them know who you are and where you're at in the world today, and anything else you'd like to share.
Sure. So I'm Shelby. I live in New York. I work in tech, and I'm originally from the Midwest.
Where in the
Um,
Midwest?
I'm from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio.
Ohio. I think I've mentioned this on the show before. My wife is also from Ohio, and she went to the Ohio State.
Go
So
Bucks.
yeah, so we have a lot of football in our household. Um, Very cool. Well, thanks for being on today. Like I said, can't wait to have a fun, entertaining, and maybe a little bit vulnerable conversation with you. And it's gonna be really cool. So Shelby and I met through the company that she works for, um, and we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of months. And when I realized that I was going to do this podcast, I'm like, oh, I got to have Shelby on. She's awesome. She'll be great for the show. So that's why we're here today. And so Shelby, have we have a tradition on the show where we get to give each other our first impressions of each other. And you and I have not talked about this. So be honest. And since it's my show, you get to go first. So, what was your first impression of me, Shelby?
First, I get to go first.
Of course you do.
Um, my first impression of you that you were really nice, but like it made sense to me that you were Midwestern after you told me, because like Midwest guys,
No,
like so
no.
like you were just so nice and like obviously due to the way we met like that makes sense but like I just knew immediately that we were going to get along because you had a really positive attitude and also you were fun because to be honest I'm not good with strangers all the time so you were
Okay.
like you made me feel really comfortable and you were just super nice to me and we had a lot of fun in our first conversation. You were
Yeah,
also
I know we
really
did.
honest, so
Yeah.
love that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, I appreciate most of that. I've lived in New York for 15 years, so I could tell you're from the Midwest. I had somebody else say that to me, and I was like, do I like that or not? And yes, the things you said I believe are true, and like I do. I've lived there for 27 years. You can't take it out of me altogether, even though I've
No.
become a New York a-hole much more in the last 15 years of living here. Trying to combine the two of them. So my first impression of you is that we met over a virtual meeting, and my impression is like you have a ton of energy and you are just a really fun person to be around. Like this is like when I first met you, I'm like, this is somebody I really want to get to know. And you've got a really cool vibe and like a sense of the word joy comes up for me. And like you bring a lot of joy into the space, whether it's in person or whether it's on a virtual meeting. And you also are somebody that's like really fun to talk to because you've got a lot of unique perspectives on things that I don't have, which we are going to talk a lot about on the show today, as you guys will see. So yeah, my first impression was like, I think we were drawn to each other like, hey, like nice Midwestern people, but also like living in New York, we got some tude. And yeah, so that was my first impression of you. Thanks for sharing that.
Amazing.
So let's get into it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So Shelby, first thing, what is something that you nerd out about?
Something that I nerd out about, which my friends will probably cringe when they listen to this, music, but specifically Drake. I've seen Drake in concert like 6 times, so it's pretty embarrassing, but obsessed. Like I used to watch him on Degrassi, like completely nerd out over all things Drake.
What What's your favorite Drake song?
Ooh, I don't even know. I would say I'm going to say Controlla is my favorite
Okay.
Drake song.
And for somebody who's a little bit older than you, I like Drake as well. I like the music. I did not watch Degrassi because I think when Degrassi came out, I was like my 20s, I believe, or yeah, 20s. What is Drake's actual name? I've never thought about that. Like, what's his name?
Aubrey.
Aubrey, is it Aubrey Drake?
Aubrey Drake Graham is Drake's real name.
Aubrey Drake Graham. So Drake is his middle name.
Yes.
That's very cool. Very cool. What's the favorite venue you've seen him at?
Ooh, okay, so I'll give you two. The first one is Bogarts, which is a very small club music venue in Cincinnati, like tiny. And then I also saw him at the Indiana State Fair. and he brought out Justin Bieber. So those are probably my two favorite Drake
Wow.
moments.
So I know the Minnesota State Fair, which I used to go to all the time. The Minnesota State Fair, we had a big grandstand. I think it holds 10,000 people, but the acts they would get were either country music acts or they were acts that were like up and coming. So was this back when Drake wasn't as big as he is now? Because I feel like Drake and Bieber on the stage at a state fair, like I don't feel like they need to play those venues anymore.
No, definitely not. So his early career for both of them, the year was 2010.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really very cool. How many? So Spotify has released like I think you actually I saw you post this on Instagram. Spotify's released like your top album, like top minutes and everything. Did you look to see how many minutes or how much time you spent with Drake listening this year?
I don't remember, but I spent an absurd amount of hours. I would say upwards of like, I think my total was 40K, and Drake was about half of that. So
Wait, hold on. 20,000 minutes of Drake this year?
I listened to a lot of Drake, like on repeat almost. So
That's
impressive.
that's amazing. That's amazing. You might want to hit him up on like Instagram. He might actually get back to you if he knows you're that big a super fan. That's a
Drake, I
lot of
listen
minutes
to
of
you a
time.
lot.
Drake, if you're listening to this episode right now, which I hope you are, please mark it on your social media channels. Her name is Shelby Jones, and she is a super fan and would like to meet you. Let's see if we can make that
Yep,
happen.
super fan.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So now we're going to move a little bit more into getting to know you, other than your music tastes and that you're from Ohio. So Shelby, what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's comfort zone?
Sure. Something that's inside of my comfort zone that's outside of the average person's comfort zone is meeting new people. I love connecting with people and talking to them. I'm not shy at all. I will talk to strangers. So yeah, I would say that's my answer.
It's interesting because you said earlier that you don't like strangers or you're uncomfortable with strangers.
I know. I think in my head I am, but like performatively I'm not. So in my head I get a little
Oh, I
bit
see.
of social anxiety before I have to talk to someone. So if someone says, "Hey, Shelby, you're getting lunch with Jason today," and we've never met, I'm like a little bit socially anxious. Like, what are we going to talk about? Are we going to have something in common? But you would never know that because once I talk to people, the conversation just flows. I'm like, okay, new friend. So,
That's so funny that you still have the anxiety even though you actually know how it's going to end up going.
yeah, because I never know. I think for me, what gives me a little bit of anxiety is I know that I'm outgoing and I can have a conversation, but I don't know if the other person is going to be open, if they want to talk to me, if they're going to have anything to say. That's where it
Yeah.
comes from.
Yeah. Interesting. How can we talk about your dating life for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
And
Or
yeah,
lack thereof.
hey, and by the way, Drake, Shelby's single too, as you just heard her say. I think is what she's saying.
Yeah.
So not to get too deep into it, but do you see this also showing up when you're out going on dates with people? Do you have the same kind of anxiety of in a dating scenario as well?
Yeah, 100%. Because I like to have deep conversations. And when you're dating, it's a little, especially guys in their 20s, they're like, why is she asking me this? Like, I want to get deep with people. Like, I want to know all about you. And not even because I'm obsessed with you. I'm just trying to assess, like, what are you like? How do you think? And the average guy wants to probably talk about sports or something, the whole conversation.
Yeah, gotcha,
And
gotcha.
I don't.
Well, if you're upfront about your intentions and what you don't want to talk about, if they like you, they'll probably want to talk about whatever. And then
Right.
I'm sure there's people like I also like to have deep conversations, which is why I'm doing this podcast because we get pretty deep with my guests on here as well. But I totally get it. Like a lot of people, that's something I think for a lot of people that's way outside their comfort zone is meeting somebody and being able to have real conversations up front. And as we're going to talk about here today is Midwestern. Like I grew up in Minnesota where the things you talk about are like the weather, the sports teams, maybe a little bit about your job and what you're doing in the weekend. Like there's not a whole lot of deep meaningful conversations, especially with people in like a easy social setting where you're like not good friends or anything yet. So the fact that you're willing to do that seems like that's a bit outside the culture of like Midwest, at least the way that I grew up. So
100%.
super cool. So now we're going to flip the script on on this question and talk about something, or let us know something that is outside of your comfort zone that's likely inside of somebody else's.
I think my answer to that is kind of what we just talked about is small talk. I hate small talk. And the average person has gotten really great at asking how, this is how the weather is, or where are you from, or like just little trivial things about you. And I hate it. So it's outside of my comfort zone when I feel like the only thing I have to say to someone or those types of things, I'm likely to just not speak because it's not going
Really?
anywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm fine with small talk leading to bigger conversations, but there are some people who are just light all the time and they only talk about those things, and that makes me so uncomfortable. Because I'm like, I don't have
Yeah.
anything else to say. We talked about the weather for 5 days in a row now. So like give me something else or let's just stop talking.
Yeah. So what do you define as small talk? Like what feels like small talk to you?
Things that feel like small talk to me either have one word answers or they don't require any like personal input. So I
Mm.
keep going back to the weather because I can say, yeah, like Jason, it's really snowing today. And you're like, yeah, check the weather app. It's snowing. Like, oh, my walk home's gonna be miserable. I don't know what else to say to that. Maybe I'm like, where do you live? But now I'm being invasive. So I can't do
Uh,
it.
that's so good. That's so good. I'm just thinking about like my relationship to small talk, and I just like to talk, so I like all talk. I prefer meaningful conversations. I'm like you, but yeah, like it's actually true. Like small talk is boring. Like it's like I'm not uncomfortable with it, but it's like super boring. It's like, oh, did you see the game last night? Yeah. Oh, like Tom Brady really threw 3 touchdowns. Yep. Like, oh, who do you think's
Right.
going to the Super Bowl? Patriots. Cool. What's next?
Right.
Right.
Like I don't know what else to say. So I kind of just drop
Right.
off.
Yeah. What I actually heard there, and this is like just from an like how it felt to me is like there's almost like you want to learn something. You want to learn
Right.
something in a conversation with somebody, which is super cool. Because yeah, if you're just like talking about the weather, you're not, and you already know that it's snowing up. You're not learning that it's anything about it. So,
Exactly.
man, so it's probably not a mistake that you and I both live in New York City now, because I think people here don't like small talk for the most part either. At least my experiences. I mean, yeah, I feel like people here are willing to get deeper quicker, and it's a little bit more confronting culture in a good way. Not confronting and like make people feel bad, but like you're willing to actually say like more of your truth and have longer conversations or deeper conversations than at least the way I grew up. So that
Yeah,
makes
no, I
total
love
sense to
it.
me. Yeah, it's great. Awesome. So, do you like to give speeches?
I don't I don't like to give speeches. I will give a speech, but I don't love it.
All right, gotcha. So I'm going to give you a scenario that's going to be outside your comfort zone. Then you have 5 minutes, and you get to deliver a speech to the whole wide world. So you're on a stage somewhere. You're coming on after Drake. You're the closing act of a Drake concert. It's live streamed. It's recorded. It's being translated all over the world. So you get 5 minutes. You get to deliver a speech to the whole world on anything you want. What would the topic of your speech be and why?
Okay. If I had to give a speech right now after Drake is funny, that's a funny thought, considering the topic. But honestly, it would probably be about natural hair. And I'm going to tell you why. So I,
Wait, sorry. Did you just say natural hair?
yes, like curly
Amazing.
hair, like black girls and guys who do not straighten their hair. So the reason I want to give this speech is because I mean, the amount of questions I get about my hair, astounding. Like astounding. And it's like ranges from do you wash your hair? How often do you wash your hair? How do you do it? How does it look so like curly? I mean, I get so many questions. So lately I've been like, I would love to just have a forum where I address all of these questions and give kind of like a little speech on it because I think people are fascinated, but they don't know what's appropriate to ask. And they really don't know how it works, which is funny to me. But yeah, I would give a speech on that, which seems out of left field, but I mean, yes, that's what I would give a speech on for sure.
That's a bad. That answer is amazing. So for the audience, Shelby is a African American with beautiful, beautiful, naturally curly hair. So I can see where this would be a topic for you. Man, I have so many questions because I'm like a white guy with not curly hair, and I'm gonna out myself. I don't understand it either. So I've never taken the
Sure.
time to understand it. So maybe you could do an AMA on Shelby could do an AMA on Reddit of just ask me about natural hair. That'd be amazing. So I actually, are there things that are offensive for somebody to ask you about your hair?
I'm really I think it is mildly offensive when people ask me if I wash it. Everyone washes their
That's
hair, even
weird.
dogs wash
Yeah.
their hair. So that's kind of
Right.
offensive because that's like a hygiene thing, but
Yeah.
other questions don't offend me. Yeah, I'm not that's probably the only question that offends me. I don't like when people touch my hair without asking me. I do not like that.
That's
That's
super
offensive.
weird. People
People
come
are
and just
like,
touch your hair
yes, 100%. People
without asking.
touch it. Yes. So, and
Ooh,
it's
that's
when a
gross.
friend or like family member does it, that's one thing. But like someone just being like, "Oh my god, your hair! I want to feel it." It's very strange. That should not happen.
That to me is like going up and touching a pregnant woman's stomach without asking. That's super weird. It's like an invasion of body space. That's really really strange.
It
What's
is.
what's the most interesting question you've ever gotten about your hair?
Um, if it grows like this naturally, like if I, what am I doing and to make it so curly? And I'm like, oh, it just grows like this. Like this is how it looks. So I think people ask me as if I've done something to grow this texture, but no, it's just how my hair looks.
Are there things you can do to grow that texture?
No, I mean you can get a perm to make it curlier, but my hair is already curly, so
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. That's an amazing answer. That is a good example of I have that is so out of my purview and I never even thought about. And also the fact that there's anybody that would walk up to somebody else and just touch their hair is so weird. I'm not a huge personal space person, but that's I'm uncomfortable just thinking about that.
Yeah, like it's almost like they're petting me. I'm like, stop touching me. It's very strange.
Yeah. What's the when is the longest your hair has ever been? Did you ever was there ever a time when you really grew it out or you really cut it short? Where, yeah.
Yeah, so I used to wear my hair straight in my Ohio days, and it was probably a little beyond shoulder length. And honestly, it's pretty long right now. I just never straighten it. It's like a little beyond my shoulders currently. So it's the longest it's
Mm,
been in a long time. Um, but I just don't ever straighten it. I haven't straightened it since January. It's almost been a year.
gotcha. Yeah. Well, it seems it would be easier to maintain not having to straighten it because you don't really have to do anything, right? Other than just
Right.
it's
Put
just
some
natural.
product in it and go.
Amazing. This is a perfect example of yeah, no idea. No idea what that's like. It sounds by the way, the audience, if we'll talk about how you can connect to Shelby at the end of the show, but it looks awesome. It's so you, it looks great. So you guys will get the
Thank
chance to see
you.
that at some point. Yeah, of course. So this is the part of the show where you get to share with the audience anything you'd like to around your journey. So what we know about you so far is that you live in New York City today. You're 26. You're obsessed with Drake. You have great naturally curly hair. Um, and what else would you like the audience to know about you? What would you like to talk about and share with us today?
Sure. So those are like the highlights of me. If we had to write a quick fact card, Drake, 26, lives in New York, from Ohio,
Hair, hair.
hair and hair. But a little bit about my journey that's been interesting is not being from New York, but moving to New York. So I moved to Chicago after school, so like another Midwestern place. And then I've lived in New York for 3 years. So while I've been in New York, I've had a plethora of jobs. And I guess that's not really the most interesting part about the journey. But what's been interesting is how much I've learned living here. So coming from the Midwest, it's pretty homogenous. So New York has just taught me a lot about me. So I'm learning now, like, and this is going to sound kind of silly, but moving to New York and seeing so many different types of people, like where I'm from in the Midwest, they're just like, they're white people, they're black people, and there might be a few Asian people. And in New York, I've met this whole conglomerate of people who are like, they're black, but they're African or they're Caribbean, etc. So it's kind of been this cool coming of age story where like I've learned more about me and gotten more comfortable. But also just like learning about other people and their experiences, being like first generation and all those things that I wasn't exposed to as a
Hmm.
child. So where that lands on my journey is taking such an interest in hearing their stories and how it shaped my story. Um, and it's just, I mean, to make a long story short, it's just kind of been a cool exploration and it's helped me understand like where I fit into all that because I love hearing and I love sharing different stories of people of color. So it's always become a passion of mine. Like as I sit today, I can't say that I even thought about this. I've been out of college for almost 5 years. Like this isn't something I thought about until my 3 years of living in New York. But it's probably this journey of just being really passionate to share those stories and how that shows up in the workplace and how those people are authentically themselves. What are their families like? What are they passionate about? So yeah, that's kind of been my current journey. And
Hmm.
Jason, and we've talked a little bit about this, figuring out how to get those stories out here.
Yeah.
Um, One day I was like, I'm going to write a book where everyone shares their stories. And as you know, that's taken a million different formats. So
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm going to do with these
Hmm.
stories, but they've been a big part of my journey. So right now I'm just figuring out like what, where to share them and what to do next.
Yeah. So I think we've talked a little bit about offline about what it was like for you growing up. Would you
Yeah,
be willing? Would you be willing to share with the audience a little bit about your journey there?
sure. So growing up,
And by the way,
the
which
first
where? Sorry. So you grew up in Dayton, Ohio.
Yes. So I was born
Dayton.
in
Yeah.
Memphis,
Memphis. Okay.
originally, and that's why my name is Shelby. A fun fact: I was born in Shelby County, Tennessee.
Cool.
Um, and after Memphis, we moved to St. Louis, where my sister was born, and then we lived in Indianapolis for 7 years. So the first place I remember living is Indianapolis. I went to the kindergarten, like wait, preschool through second grade there. So I remember living there, and then we moved to Dayton when I was in the third grade. I I mean, I had a positive experience growing up there, but it's definitely it's now that I'm looking back on it and reflecting on it, it was just very homogenous. So like I was one of like few black people there at my school
Hmm.
and just kind of growing up and feeling a little out of place. Like I had amazing friends. I met such great people, but I mean the hair situation, like there are times where I'm like mom, like girls are wearing their hair like this. Can I wear my hair like this? No. Okay, great. Um, and like people trying to straighten my hair at a sleepover. Like it was just my differences became so apparent to me from my
Hmm.
childhood all the time. So even though I was like theoretically fitting in, I always felt different. And my parents, which I thank them for now, but my mom and I've had this discussion. I definitely complained of like they weren't your typical like very involved in the community, like knowing everybody by name. Like my parents aren't from Ohio. They're both from the South. They kind of keep to themselves. And so I had friends whose parents have known each other for years and grew up in the area. So for me, it was like a lot of feeling like an outsider, like having friends,
Hmm.
but feeling like this isn't your place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I got out of there as soon as I could. It's basically what happened.
Yeah. Where did you end up going to college?
I went to Kent State, so it's right between Cleveland and Akron.
Gotcha. And is that also a homogenous environment?
Oh yes, but Kent, I love sharing the story of Kent with people because I tell people of color all the time, like I went to Kent State, I joined a sorority, I was in Chi O, I lived in the house, and people are like, "What?" So Kent was kind of the same. I mean, there were definitely more people of color, but it was hard for me because I didn't grow up around a lot of people of color. So that was a hard group for me to assimilate in also. Like I didn't necessarily feel welcome with those people.
Yeah.
So, I made it my own. I loved college. I made amazing friends. But it was kind of the same situation where a lot of the same. Like I was one of few black girls in my sorority and in my friend group. And so I think it wasn't until I moved to New York that I kind of broke out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example again of like I just have no idea what that's like. I shared this on another episode. I grew up in the suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota, and I graduated. I think it was like around 550 classmates, one Jewish kid, one black kid, and everybody
Wow.
else. Yeah, like you want to talk about homogenous. So, um, I've also had the same experience. Like, just being completely honest, I didn't have one. I didn't have one friend of any sort of minority in high school. And I went to the University of Minnesota, which is a huge school, right? It's like 55,000 people. So we have people of all like ethnicities, but all my friends, yeah, I think my first friend that was a minority in my whole life was like my junior year in college, which is just crazy to think about now. And like, I love all people. I'm a lover of people, but like, I just wasn't exposed and it wasn't a thing. And so for me, living in New York City, I look at my friends now. I'm like, wow, it's like it's so cool to have a wide variety of friends. And what's so cool about this podcast is that I get to talk to people from all walks of life. But yeah, I can't imagine what that must be like to be like the actual literally the minority in your class and want to like be more like your friends or like this hair. Like I'm thinking about the hair straightening thing. Like I never had an experience like that because I was like everybody else that I was friends with. So um, I'm curious if you'd be willing to share, like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody like me who wants to be better and know more and be able to relate more to all types of people? From a place of like I want to, but I feel like for me, like I feel like there's just like an actual gap, and like I just don't know. I don't know what I don't know. So do you have any advice or any wisdom you'd share with myself and the audience on like what would you recommend for somebody like me to just be more to understand?
Sure. I think a lot of understanding comes from listening and but also listening takes exposure. So I think the first step is like exposing yourself to different types of people. You made a good point, Jason, of saying you've never had to really think about this because it's like you've been the majority. So putting
Mhm.
yourself in situations where you're not and you're able to just like pick up on some of these conversations and things of that nature, but also doing a lot of research. Like there's so many things I know that are outside of, where I sit in the world. Like I have Jewish friends, I have friends who are African, I have friends of all different ethnicities. And sometimes it's just like doing the work. Like if I want to know more about something, I'm like on Instagram, like looking up different like hashtags and like just kind of
Mhm.
like natural hair is a giant hashtag on Instagram.
Is it
And
really?
so it is. So there's just so much information that I nerd out on the internet where I'm just reading. But then it's also, I think, that in tandem with just exposing yourself to
Mhm.
different amount of like different types of people goes a long way.
Yeah. And then for the people that are listening that are teachers, managers, CEO,
Yeah.
like you're like, what would you recommend for people that also work on teams or are in a supervisory or leadership role that also kind of like come from the majority and whatever that majority is there? Like, how do you better relate to the people that work on your teams, or if you're a teacher relating to those children in the classroom? Like, what would you recommend for people like that?
I think something that's been really special to me, and I've been lucky with managers, is they ask me about my perspective. Like, I think one of the best things you
Mm,
can do is to not assume. I think people made a lot of assumptions about me, whether it be my professional life or in school. One of the ones I'll share with you is someone assumed I was first generation, just because I was Black, like first generation college student. And I was in high school
oh
and
wow.
we're doing all these forms to like figure out where we want to go to college and things like that. And I'm like, my grandparents went to college. Like I not
Yeah.
first generation college. My parents went to college. They both have master's degrees. So it's like not assuming and asking people things about themselves is great because when you ask, people are sometimes more willing to share.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. And then I also think it's believing people. So when someone you manage, or if you're a teacher, someone you teach has a bad experience or something unfavorable happens to them, like listen to them. And I know a lot of people like to throw out the phrase, which isn't my favorite, assume good intent.
Hmm.
Sometimes people don't have good intentions. And even if they
Yeah.
did, even if someone had the best intentions, you still hurt someone. So it's acknowledging how those people feel goes such a long way because relating is going to be hard since it just wasn't your experience. But when I feel that empathy and that willingness to help me and listen, like that goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Shelby. I learned a lot there. And outing myself here on the show again, I'm like, for people that know me in the real world, and it's probably coming across in the podcast as well, is I'm pretty outgoing, like friendly, like people are like my favorite thing. But as you're talking, I'm thinking that I actually am intimidated when I'm in a minority because it's not that I don't want to know people. I don't know what to do. Like I'm actually feel like I'm like the whole thing of like asking questions. I'm realizing I'm like thinking I'm afraid to ask the wrong question that's going to come
Yeah.
across as offensive, or I'm afraid that I'm actually going to be looked at as like, oh, there's just another person who's like trying to understand. So, like you said, is it actually good intention? Because not everybody has good intentions. So, thank you for sharing all that. That was really cool to hear because I learned a ton. So, thank you for
Of
sharing that.
course.
Yeah. So, we're going to move along to the next section of the show, and I've been asking you a lot of questions. We're getting to know you, and so now we get to flip the script, and I get to sit in the guest seat, and you get to be the host, and you get to ask me anything you want, and I will answer it.
Okay. So, my first question for you is if you weren't doing what you do now, like coaching, what would be your dream job? Like, what would you pack everything up to do?
Oh, this is so easy. So if like I actually could do the thing I wanted to do,
Yeah.
could I give you two answers?
Yes. Two answers.
I'd be the lead guitar player for Keith Urban. So I would be like Keith. So Keith Urban plays lead guitar. I would be in Keith Urban's band. I'm a big country music guy. Love Keith Urban, and I play guitar. So I never wanted to be the lead singer, where I had to be super super famous. But I always wanted to be in a band, and I love music. Like, would I want to be Slash for Guns N' Roses or like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin? It'd be like Slash is arguably as famous as Axl Rose, who's the lead singer of Guns N' Roses. If you're no Guns N' Roses, so maybe I'd like to be famous. That would be cool. But like, I'd want to be a lead guitar player for a rock or like country rock band would be one. And number two, which is a very ironic answer. When I was little growing up, the thing I always wanted to be was Johnny Carson and then Jay Leno. Like run a talk show, entertain people, and interview super cool people. Ironically, or maybe not so ironically, that's what I'm doing with this podcast. So the podcast for me is in a way like my dream job. Like it's not a job; it's just something that I love to do. And but yeah, like just spending time. Either if I'm not playing music, spending time with people and interviewing amazing people like you and hearing things and learning things is just like so cool. So in a way, like, am I ever going to be a rock musician? Probably not. In a way, doing my dream job now. So and then I have sorry, I'm going to give you a third one. I've always wanted to own a sailing excursion company in the Caribbean and like just run the boat because I like to sail as well. So have you ever been to like a boat cruise in the Caribbean? Like, they get on like a catamaran or something.
I haven't. I've been to the Bahamas, but we didn't go on a boat cruise.
Yeah. So my wife and I were in Grand Cayman in May, and I actually asked the person running the boat, who's like the captain of the boat. I'm like, this must be just awesome. He's like, it's not bad. I'm like, you serving drinks, you're listening to like Bob Marley, you're doing sunset cruises in the Caribbean where it's always nice. And then I'm like, you must meet a lot of girls. He's like, yeah, I meet a lot of girls. I'm like that's just like the perfect situation. Now I don't need to meet girls. I'm a happily married man, but no, but I think there's something super cool about running a business that's specifically for tourists because they're in a good mood. Like it's like if you're on a boat excursion and it's like at 5 o'clock, it's likely you've either had a couple of happy hour drinks or you're like, I'm going on a relaxing sunset cruise on a boat. It's highly unlikely that anybody on that boat's going to be mad, frustrated. They're like they're on vacation. So I would love to like run a boat, like a catamaran sailboat, and just take people out and do that. That would be so. Maybe I could combine all three. We could do like a concert on the boat, and then I could maybe like interview people while we're sailing. I don't know. Maybe I could combine all three into one really interesting, weird, fun job. But yeah, those would be the three things if I could do anything that I would do.
Sounds like living your best life.
It
Um,
does. It does.
My second question is, what is the hardest part about being a parent?
Oh, I love that question. So for the audience who doesn't know, I have a almost 4-year-old. So the hardest part about being a parent, and I'm gonna relate this question to kind of our life now, because for me, like I wasn't a huge fan of the 0 to 6 month thing, which I think a lot of dads get because you're not really necessary. It's like the mom is the only person who can really feed the child, and like the dad's just kind of like there to like, change diapers, and they're also like kind of a little mushy, right? They're not interacting much yet. I think the hardest thing now is actually the hardest thing now is like when you're it's like having the good times and then realizing that like it's moving fast. And I know it's like a huge cliche and it's super annoying, but what's hard is like when you have those sweet moments of being like she's almost 4, like daddy, I love you, I want to give you a hug, and then realizing like 10 years from now she's probably going to hate me. And like thinking about like I can still pick her up, she sits in my lap, like we watch, like we watched Toy Story 4 together, and like you just have these super innocent 3-year-old conversations and realizing that this little human being who's like, yes, they have their moments, but they're just like they're so innocent, like that they're actually going to grow up and like have to be in the world like the rest of us, and there's going to be times they hate you and say mean things to you, and also that they're going to get um, that she's going to get the crap kicked out of her, like we all do in life. She's going to have somebody break up with her. She's going to have, somebody say something mean to her at school, which happens now. But at 3, it's like, oh, like blah 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 said that they didn't like my dress. Then they forget about it 2 minutes later. It's like there's going to be things that are going to happen to her that are actually going to affect her life, where she'll like go talk to a therapist or she'll bring it into her relationships, and like that'll be the thing. And what's also hard about that is like there are things that I will do that will not be positive for her life. It's I would say like like for parents, like part of our job is just like we're gonna screw up our kids. Like that's just the deal. And the way we raise our children is they'll bring them. Like I'm sure there's things in the way you operate today that come from your family of origin. I know there's things that I have that I don't love about myself that come from the way I was raised. And it's nothing wrong with my parents. It's just that we're all just a bunch of human beings out here trying to do the best of what we got. And nobody can really tell you how to parent. Like it's the one thing that like has happened what 7 billion times right now, and that's not including all the people that have been born before us, and like nobody can actually really tell you how to do it. You can read books, but then like oh, that doesn't work for my kid, then you got to figure it out. So yeah, I think the hardest thing is like enjoying the moment while realizing that it's hard to see like oh, that's going to be a 13-year-old someday, that's going to be a 23-year-old someday, that's going to be a 33-year-old someday. And yeah,
Yeah, she's gonna grow up.
she's going to
But you'll
grow
be
up. That
great.
is
You'll be great.
yeah, yeah. And it's also the journey, and every age is fun, and there's always new stuff going on. So really cool question, Shelby. Thanks for asking. I've never really talked
Of
about that on the show
course.
before.
I'm super curious. I want to be a parent one day, and it seems like an extreme
Yeah.
sport. So
Well, your natural curiosity and ability to bring different perspectives will make you a really awesome parent.
I hope kids are terrifying. Really?
I'm still
Um,
terrified too, and I have one.
they're terrifying.
Yes.
I have one more question.
Yeah, let's do
If
it.
you weren't living in New York, where would you live?
This is easy. There's only 4 places in the world I've ever been to that I would live. New York, where I live, Paris, London, or Hawaii.
Paris, London, or Hawaii? Um, okay. So if you had to pick one of them, which one are you living in?
Okay. I think London. I have a weird obsession with British people. Like one of my jobs, I actually worked mostly with our global team in England, and I just love Brits. Like I love the sense of humor. I love the culture. I love the accents. I love the sense of style. I just think, and like I'm not like I don't like British royalty. I'm not like oh I love Meghan Markle, and like it's not about that. It's I just love Brits. I like the culture. I think I love people from England for whatever reason. And I love the country. And I just think London is a super cool city. And yeah, I think London would be the place that if I choose. And I don't have a language barrier there, so I could go and like operate as normal there. So yeah. London would be the place. And I say that today, but I think if you asked me maybe like 10 to 15 years, it would probably be Hawaii when I'm like, all right, now I'm ready to just chill and like just like getting up and surfing in the morning and like eating like fish tacos and like watching the sunset and would just be amazing. So, but today would be London.
Those are good choices. I love London. I would move there. So
Yeah.
I'm co-signing London.
Perfect. All right, we'll see you there. I just need to talk to my wife about it.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, wow. Thank you for those questions. That was really fun. And I've never shared any of those on here. So thank you for asking them.
Of course.
So Shelby, what are you passionate about besides Drake?
I besides Drake, I would say I'm passionate about connecting people. I love when I have an opportunity to introduce a friend to another friend, whether it's a work connection or social connection or a dating connection. I just love introducing people to each other.
Awesome. What do you get out of doing that?
I mean, selfishly, I like it when my friends are friends, but I think a lot of struggles for people come from not knowing where to start or who can help them. So, say I was looking for a new job, or say I had a friend who wanted to start a podcast and I could introduce that friend to you. I just think it makes
Hmm.
people's lives a little easier and gives them a baseline. And so for me, I just like to see all my friends succeed. So, and I honestly
Great.
do it for strangers too. Like people slide into my LinkedIn DMs who went to Kent, who I don't know, and they're like, "Hey, you're in New York. You've worked X, Y, and Z at these different places. Like, can we chat?" And I like doing that,
Oh, you
paying it
did? Yeah.
forward.
That's awesome, Shelby. Because that's something I think a lot of people don't do. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'm too busy. Like, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. I'm too busy." And that to me is an example where growing up in the Midwest, like having that kind of like thing inherent in you is actually like the super positive part about all of it. Is like I think most Midwesterners were just helpful people. That's just like the culture that I grew up is that you're helpful to others, and I think that's great. Yeah, I love that. Love that. Shelby, thanks so much for the questions. Those are really fun, and I got a chance to share some things that I've never had to share before with the audience. So thank you for doing that. So questions back to you, because it's my turn. It's my turn to take the host microphone back and ask you some more questions. So Shelby, what are you passionate about?
I am passionate about connecting people. It's my favorite thing to do to introduce friends and colleagues and former coworkers to each other and just kind of go from there.
And what is it that you get from connecting people?
I love when my friends are friends, but other than that, I love just the opportunities that it brings. So, say that a friend was like, "Hey, Jason, I want to start a podcast." It's really cool to be able to say, "Oh, wait, like I have a friend who's doing a podcast. Like, talk to Jason." So it's
Nice.
just a
Yeah.
cool way to help your friends along. And even if it doesn't end up happening, say the friend doesn't start a podcast, they met you and they made a connection, and that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm the same way. One of the things in coaching is we kind of identify our essences, and one of mine is actually connection. Like I'm also a huge connection person, so I feed that through a lot of ways. But one of the ways is actually doing this podcast. To get to connect with cool people and interview them and learn a lot about them. Like for example, you today. I knew some things about you, but I've learned a lot about you today. So totally get that. Curious if anything comes to mind around the most interesting connection you've ever made that like you at the time you didn't know where it was going to lead, but it actually the result was something that you never saw that was actually ended up being super cool.
Yeah, so actually, how I got to my current role in tech was one of those connections. I was living in Chicago. The year was 2016, and I was quitting my job, my first job out of college, without a job and moving to New York. Very risky. And
Yeah.
I was out with a friend, Lindsay, who we'd hung out. We met in Chicago, and meeting Lindsay is a strange connection. She is my college roommate's best friend from home's college roommate. So we just ended up living in
Okay.
Chicago at the same time. Weird connection with her, but anyway, she's amazing. So she's a recruiter in Chicago. We were out to dinner just talking. And I was saying to her, "Hey, I'm quitting soon. I'm moving." Like, she's like, "What are you going to do? Do you have a job in New York?" And I'm like, "No, I kind of want to go back into event production, but I don't know. We'll see." So I was kind of just telling her like what I had in mind, but I had no job. So she was like, "Oh, small world." I have a cousin who does events in New York. Like, you guys could talk. I thought nothing of it because I don't know. I'm like, I wonder what he does. Like, doing events could mean so many things. Does he work at a company I'd want to work at? And her cousin's fabulous. Lindsay's cousin has literally worked everywhere. And so him and I
Hmm.
did like an informational interview, just like to talk and like get a little bit about where he's been, what he's doing now. But it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't like, hey, I have a job for you. It was just like him being amazing and taking the time to talk to me. So from there, we didn't really talk that much at all. And I ended up landing a job at Condé Nast, and then I went to Refinery 29 to freelance and do events
Hmm.
there. And so while I was at Refinery, I was like kind of looking for other opportunities. And so I messaged him and I was like, hey, looking for new roles right now. These are the agencies I have interviews with. Can you just tell me what you think? Because you've worked everywhere. And he said, actually, the agency I'm at currently is looking. We have a big contract with a tech company. Like, let's talk about it. So I
Yeah,
sent him my resume. He sends it to the hiring manager, and I got the job. And that's how I landed in tech.
that's
Um,
amazing.
but yeah, it was amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's like putting yourself out there, right? And like saying, like setting your intentions for what you want, and not being afraid to raise your hand and say, "Hey, I could use some help."
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
think that's like the key is telling people when you need help.
yeah. Which is also something back to one of the original questions, like outside your comfort zone. A lot of people are very, very uncomfortable asking for help. Makes them mean about them that they don't have the power to do it themselves. And I'm a big fan. I think we all need each other, and we all can use help from each
100%.
other. Yeah. So what's the thing out of everything that we've talked about today, or anything in your life really? Like, what's the thing that you're most proud of?
Mm. I'm gonna give you 2 things. Like a surface
Yes.
thing, I am so proud of the fact that I live alone in New York City. I never thought
Nice.
that would be a thing when I moved here. Right, like after college, I didn't have a job, and my first apartment post grad was $900 and in Bed-Stuy with 2 roommates from Kent. Um, Now I live by myself, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. But
What
on
neighbor?
a deep,
Sorry, Shelby. What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Gramercy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My second thing that I am proud of is just like my journey. I think I did not see this for myself personally, and I grew up in a household where I was taught I could do anything. I mean, my parents are the most supportive people I know. But I didn't think I'd be here at 26, to be honest. I was like, am I gonna it was a dream of mine to work in tech, but because I'm in a creative career, I was like, how is that gonna work? What are the jobs for creatives in tech? And getting into one of these tech companies seems harder than getting into Harvard. And I went to state school, so I was like, what like is that gonna happen? So I'm just really proud of what I've been able to accomplish in my career, but also while maintaining like a big sense of my roots. I think moving to New York hasn't made me lose who I am. Still very close to my family, so close with all my Ohio friends. A group of them just came to visit me. So yeah, I'm proud of being able to accomplish this life, but like not losing sense of who I truly am.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Shelby. Here comes a vulnerability question. Are you up for it?
Yeah, I'm up for it.
All right. Well, you haven't heard the question yet, but we'll see. So, what's something that you're afraid that might actually be true about you?
Something I'm afraid that might actually be true is that I'm good with coming up with ideas, but I'm not great at execution. So I have so many ideas, and this doesn't really apply to work, but in life, I have so many ideas about cool things I could build or, interesting, whether it be like a podcast or writing a book or just like moments where I'm able to speak up about my perspective.
Hmm.
I am afraid that I know I have the talent and I know I have the ideas, but I won't execute.
Mm. Second part of the question.
Okay.
What do you do to compensate for that fear?
Right now, I have joined a writing group, and that has helped me so much, to be honest. It's just a group of us. Some people I work with, some of them I don't. We meet at a woman's apartment and we free write, we share pieces we've written. And the reason that helps me is because I love to write. My mom was an English teacher most of my life. And I say I like to do it and I'm good at it, but I don't practice it a lot. And I think in order
Mm,
to do the things I want to do, like write a book ultimately, I need to keep flexing those muscles. So writing group was a vulnerable moment for me because I'm like, I have to go to these strangers. Some of them are coworkers. I'm sharing these vulnerable things I wrote, but it has been life changing. Like
nice.
I love it. It's made me more comfortable. And just like I've gotten really great feedback on my writing, what I could do better, what's going well. So yeah, I think putting myself in situations where I'm gonna have to be a little uncomfortable and I'm gonna have to practice is helping me overcome.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Want to just check and make sure you have a few more minutes for us and a little bit of more brain space left, which I'm sure you
Yes, of
do.
course.
Awesome. So, how would you describe to us your general philosophy of life?
My general philosophy of life. It's funny because I have conflicting thoughts. So
Hmm.
I would say that my general philosophy of life is to have fun with it. I don't take things too seriously. I just like to go with the flow. And if I'm not enjoying something, I want to be done doing it. So that applies to work. When I say that, people are like, "Do you just quit jobs?" Yes, I do. Like when something is no longer bringing me joy or serving me, and I'm not having fun with it, understanding that every day is not a party, I'm over it. I'm done. So I just like to have fun with it. That's my life philosophy. Just like to have a good
Yeah.
time.
So you mentioned two things there. What was the other side of that?
The other side of that is I'm thinking out loud right now to a specific person. So I have a coworker who I worked with at Conde who now works with me currently. And she would say that my approach to life can be a little more rigid, but it's so funny. Like, I think being rigid in life is how I have fun, if that makes sense. Like,
Mm,
setting boundaries in life is what makes me able to enjoy it. It's not fun for me when I feel like all of my time belongs to work. It's not like I leave work and I'm not working anymore. Unless it's a very like serious project I need to be on. Like I'm gonna go to a workout class. I'm gonna go to happy hour. I'm gonna call my mom. But those are rigid boundaries for me because that's how I maintain fun. So
yeah.
that's why I said
Man.
there are probably two aspects to that.
No, that's super cool. I think that is pretty uncommon, especially working in tech in New York City. I feel like everybody is working a lot, and they're always, do coaching work. I coach a lot of people in tech, and the thing that I hear all the time is, well, I want to work out and I want to spend more time with my friends, but I end up just working. I end up just working, working, working. So what I heard in there is something for the audience to take is like being really intentional about your boundaries and what fills you up and what gives you pleasure inside of work and outside of work, and what actually allows you to expand your capability for fun,
Yeah, 100%. I
which
think
is awesome.
when you are at work, you give them 110% of yourself. But when I'm not at
Mhm.
work, I like to have fun. I mean, I live in New York City. I don't want to be glued to my laptop all the time. I want to go out.
Yeah.
I want to have fun. I want to enjoy my apartment. It's not that serious.
Yeah. Not that serious. You and I are exactly alike in that. I'm also, my general philosophy on life is, and this is like if it isn't fun, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm like literally like, I don't really do anything in my life anymore that isn't fun. And yes, of course, there's like paying taxes, not fun.
Not fun.
Um, you know, having to discipline a 3-year-old and take away their show, not fun. But overall, like the big things in my life, if it's not fun for me, I'm not doing it. If I don't find a person fun to be around, which I find almost everybody to be fun, talking to cool people podcast that we're on, like I think everybody's cool. But if there is somebody that I'm like, it's just not doing it, I won't spend time with them. If I've got in my coaching practice, if I find a client that wants to pay me, but I just don't feel it with them, I don't think they're fun, I probably won't take them on, even though like it'd be great to have them as a client. So for me, like you and I are exactly the same, like fun. And for me, like setting the boundaries of that as well. So I do things like, I still get to do guitar lessons. I take improv classes, and I like look for ways to intentionally build fun into my life, which then to me, when I'm having fun outside of work, spills into my coaching, spills into doing the podcasting, which is to me, it's all just one big ball of fun. So
Definitely.
yeah, so you and I definitely share that. So that's really cool. So I want to leave this space for you. If there's anything that's come up for you through our time today that has crossed your mind that you'd like to share with the audience at this point, previous question, something that's come up since then, anything you'd like to leave the audience with in terms of about you or your philosophy or anything else. Yes, is anything you'd like to share with the audience at this point?
Yeah, so I think it was really cool how you shared how much you learned about me in that little blip where I was talking about my journey and then how I'd give a speech on natural hair care. Um, you brought up some good points there when you asked me the question of what can people do to, make sure that they're kind of exposing themselves. Like, what do they do as a manager, as a teacher, as a person in the community? And I want to leave people with the thought, although I already said it, but just reiterating, like, spend some time with some people who don't look like you. And they don't have to be black, they can be anything. But I just encourage everyone to do it. I've done that a lot this year, and it has expanded my horizons. I'm on a global team. I've met people who are Indian and people who are British and like just all different types of ethnicities. And it's fun to talk about what are their families like. Like my manager is Brazilian. And I
Mm,
ask her all the time, like, what is it like when you go home? And what was it like when you grew up? And what do you do over the holidays? What are your traditions? So encourage everyone to speak to someone who they don't know and learn about them and take something
yeah,
from the conversation.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So you'd already mentioned this before, that you like connecting with people. So where can the audience find you, Shelby? Like,
Sure.
how can they
So
connect with you?
I'm everywhere.
Everywhere,
On
everywhere.
I'm everywhere. So on LinkedIn, I'm Shelby Jones, and on Instagram, I am Shelby SHELBI HQ. So Shelby headquarters, and then I'm also on
Love it.
Twitter. So it's Shelbs is my tag. So
Nice. And
find me
I'll
somewhere.
yeah, I will definitely put the all those links in the show notes as well. And wrapping up for today. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for being on and spending time with us. It's been really cool to talk to you, and we know each other fairly well. But I learned, like I said, I learned a ton about you, so it was really fun to have you on. I'd love if you could leave us with some words of wisdom, and those words of wisdom should fit on a post-it note. What would you like to leave the audience with?
This is a tough one because nothing I say fits on a post-it note.
It
If
could
I
be a
could
big
leave
post-it note. It could be a big post-it note. It doesn't
a
have to be a
big
little one.
post-it note. If I could leave the audience with some words of wisdom, I would say to always have a lot of fun and to pay it forward when you can. Those are the two most important things to me. I already told you why I like to have a lot of fun, and I think paying it forward has done so much for me. It's just good karma. Like if you can ever help anyone, whether it's a connection with work or a passion project, just do it. Pay it forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelby. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with me, Jason Frizzell. Enjoyed today's episode? Please tell your friends, give us a shout out and a follow on Facebook and Instagram, and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. If something from this episode has piqued your interest and you'd like to connect about it, please email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners.